Hey guys, it's ggDoA. Decided I would make a video about the Overwatch Spectator client. Overwatch obviously is a game that Monty and I are going to be casting pretty soon for OGN. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun. But right now, the Observer mode could use some work. And I do want to preface this kind of by saying that within a year or something like that, we should be in good shape as far as the viewership experience for Overwatch goes. It seems like Blizzard's pretty active about making changes to the game right now to improve the gameplay at least. So hopefully we'll see some improvements to the spectator side as well pretty soon as some of these bigger tournaments start to roll in. So we'll see. But there's a lot to talk about, and Overwatch is in a unique place because it is kind of that FPS MOBA hybrid. So as far as the viewership experience goes, I think you really kind of need to look at both to find where Overwatch should be. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but because there's just a lot that could be talked about, I decided after some thought to narrow it down to three major things that I really hope we get in the spectator mode sooner rather than later. So I guess let's just dive into it. So first, I wanted to talk about life bars. Now, if you're playing the game, you can turn on the life bars all the time for your allies. You can have them on for the enemies. And in first-person mode, in the spectator client, the life bars are viewable by anybody in first-person mode. However, in third-person mode, in zoomed-out view, you don't really get to see the life bars unless there's something modifying somebody's health, like Anna's grenade is a good example of something that will make the life bars pop up for a short time. But you don't get that sort of MOBA experience where you can see the life bars floating above the characters' heads the whole time. And so to illustrate my point with this, let me actually bring up this. So this, you might recognize it. It's the Zed versus Zed duel, Faker versus Ryu, back from the Champions 2013 Grand Finals. It was a really, really exciting moment in League of Legends esports. It was a really exciting moment in my career personally. And honestly, a big part of what made that play exciting was the life bars, right? Because you could see where everybody was at. Now, just like in Overwatch, League of Legends lets you see the life bars of the players on the sides of the screen. Overwatch has it on the top, but it's always visible in some way, shape, or form. But you can see in the middle of the screen, I've taken out the life bars, and it's there's no tension there. There's no drama. Basically, right now we're seeing in very low resolution two characters starting to fight. Two Zeds starting to fight. But, who cares? Zed fights, all the time. It's not a big deal. But if you go ahead and add in the life bars, again, there they are, suddenly there's a lot of drama in this image, right? You see Faker Zed being very, very low health. You see Ryu looking pretty healthy overall. And if you know what happens, of course, there's this great outplay. And Faker comes out on top despite entering the fight with really, really low health to begin with. And so, as a viewer, as a spectator, you're not going to be looking at the characters on the screen and then looking at the life bars on the side or up at the top in Overwatch's case and looking back down the screen, looking up. You just can't do that. That's not possible to keep track of both of those things and really enjoy the game. And the same is honestly pretty true for casting as well. It's hard to get excited as a caster. It would have been hard, I should say, to get excited as a caster in this situation, right? If there wouldn't have been life bars and I would have just seen them fighting and I could have looked off to the top side of the screen at some point, but then you kind of miss some action in the middle. But because of this, I'm like, oh no, Faker's in trouble, that kind of thing. And I think this can directly apply to Overwatch as well because you do have that sort of MOBA hybrid. And I'm going to go back to my Photoshop document here that I have open on my computer. I'm going to take a drink of water because my throat's kind of messed up today. There we go. And so here we have a point on Ilios, right? And I just jumped into a game with a bunch of AI players and just kind of zoomed around and took some screenshots. And I decided to use this one to kind of illustrate my point. So you can look up at the screen at any point and see what the life totals are at, right? And you could do this if this was a replay or not a replay, if this was a VOD we were watching or something like that too, right? You could see those. But watch what happens when I take the life bars from up here, and all I did was just copy them and move them down, and I put those life bars above the characters. Here we go. And I added a little black border around it to make it easier to see too, because you'd assume if this was implemented, it would be easier to see. Now, all of a sudden, we have a narrative. We have something that I can talk about We have excitement that I, as a caster, can build off of for you, while keeping my eyes on the action at the same time. And as a viewer, it's much easier for you to keep your eyes on the action and see, the really important stuff. So we see, just for example, Zenyatta getting pretty low here. I mean, he's probably going to die. There's a Roadhog standing right in front of him, so that's a left click away from death. Meanwhile, Zarya's kind of off on her own here. She's at half health. That's kind of tense. Things aren't looking good for blue team in general here. Torbjorn, for whatever reason, he's in the game, and he's looking fine, but he's Torbjorn. And then Reaper has about half health, and he's kind of off to the side, so maybe he can get something done against Zenyatta, but not likely. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that by having the life bars viewable above the characters' heads in the third-person mode, in the zoomed-out mode, that... as a side note, I think this view of the game is criminally underused right now. I think we should be looking at a lot more zoomed out views like this. But to be fair, I think one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of views like this during fights is because when you watch this view in the game right now, you see people shooting each other and then one falls over and you see it pop up in the kill feed and you're like, oh, I guess he died. But if we would have that view with the life bars available for everybody, suddenly the casters have things to get excited about, the viewer has things to get excited about when they see people's health getting low, and a duel like that Zed versus Zed, the Faker versus Ryu duel, those kinds of duels happen in Overwatch all the time, right? Those really, really close tracer battles, things like that. And you can enjoy them from the first-person view, but in a team fight situation where sometimes it's good to be able to see more than just the people you can see in a first-person view, then to see those outplays and to see those duels, you really need to have the life bars available. So I think that's a relatively small thing that they could add into the game right now that would make a big difference in terms of how well someone can cast Overwatch and how enjoyable it is to watch, And I mean, anything that increases the drama, that increases attention is, of course, good for the viewership experience. And more than that, anything that increases your understanding as a viewer of what's going on in the screen, what the stakes are. Maybe it's a really tight fight over the map, over this control point. Both teams are at 99%, and you see one team, everybody's at half health, and the other team, everybody's at nearly full health. Suddenly, that's a lot more tense than if you saw that same scene without the life bars. And again, I know they're at the top of the screen, but you're not going to be looking back and forth. That just doesn't happen, and you shouldn't have to do that as a viewer either. You should be able to just look at the screen, see the action, and see the drama as well. So that's the first thing that I think should be added to the Spectator client to be able to really kind of enjoy the game a lot more, is to be able to see the life bars in that third-person, zoomed-out wide-angle view. Moving on, the second one is one of the ones that's bugged me since like second one of observer mode in Overwatch, is that the ultimates in spectator mode are represented by a number with a percentage sign behind it. So you can see this on the little character icons, of course, that it's like 25%, 12%, 16%, and all that. And yes, that does tell you exactly where the ult building is at for those characters. But as a viewer or as a caster, again, it's tough to be able to glance up at that and see where someone's ult is at. You don't want to take a lot of time seeing where somebody's ult is at. And for myself personally, I've always really struggled with numbers in every capacity in my life. So when I see a number like this, my brain has to like read it and then be like, all right, 12. What does 12% mean? Okay, it means a little bit. And then as I go through that thought process, I can be like, okay, Zarya's got a long way to go on her ult yet. Whereas if we just add this, suddenly we can see very easily, if we glance up, where everybody's ult meter is at. And I want to say that the way that I've done it here, with just having a bar that fills up behind the player name, isn't really how I'd like to see it represented in the game. I don't think it's a great way to do it either. But my point in doing this is to just say that anything is better than what we have right now. Any sort of graphical representation of where somebody's ult meter is at, how much it's built up, is better than just having a number with a percentage sign behind it. Especially, from a casting perspective, when I'm thinking about how I'm going to be, casting this game, if I'm going to have to be looking up and looking at those percentages, it's going to be tough to do that and also keep track of what the action is on the screen, especially in first-person view. It's not as bad in third-person view, but especially in first-person view, if you're, trying to keep track of all the camera movements, where people are at as things are spinning around, and you have to read those ultimate numbers up at the top of the screen, that's a pretty tough, and I think a lot of other casters would tell you the same thing right now. So any sort of graphical representation of where the ultimates are at would be good. Maybe instead of how I've done it, you could have it where, because I like this little glowing blue check mark thing. I like that. That's an easy way to glance up and see, oh, Torb's got his ult. I don't need to read anything. It stands out. It's really easy to notice. But what if maybe this was like dim when it was building, and there was like a circle around it that filled up or something like that. Because the alt meter when you're playing first person does have a graphical representation. You can see that yellow circle filling up. So why not take that, shrink it down, change the colors if you need to, and put it around this check mark and just have it fill up like that. I think that would help a lot. In general, I think the way that the character portraits are displayed right now is pretty tough to read. The fact that there's not a lot of black outlines around it means that it kind of gets lost in the background of the maps, especially if you're, with the bitrate that tournaments are being broadcast at right now, it gets lost really easily. I think transparency is kind of overused in the UI in general, but that's a whole different topic. Right now, just talking about the alt meters, anything graphical would improve what we've got right now, Oh man, that fresh Korean air is affecting my voice. Anyway, good time to record a video, right? But yeah, so that's number 2, is just some sort of easier way to see where people's alts are at than having to read a percentage number. So yeah, something like this I think is pretty cool. Now, the third thing that I do think is absolutely vital for the spectator experience is a minimap. And before we go any farther, I want to make sure that you know that I'm not saying that I want a minimap in the game when you're playing it. I don't think there should be a minimap in the game when you're playing it. That's not what FPS is about in general. I think it's good to, obviously learn the maps, be able to figure out where people are at by audio cues, visual cues, rather than, seeing a minimap. Even something like, Halo's motion tracker is, a little bit too far, I think. But I don't know. That's just me. But so I don't want the minimap in there when I'm playing. I do want the minimap in there, though, when I'm watching. And the reason for that is because one of the most important things in spectating Overwatch going forward as these teams get better is going to be watching for team plays, right? It's not just going to be about compositions. Right now, the game, as it is observed, is very composition-centric, right? We talk about the 3-3. We talk about, 2-2-2. We talk about, 4 tanks, 2 supports, whatever. But the point is people talk a lot about compositions, X beating Y and all that, and there isn't as much focus on the positioning of players, where, maybe you look at something like, I love to use Temple of Anubis for an example with this, where you talk about point A on Temple of Anubis, right? You have a very distinct defensive setups from different teams. If you watch a lot of tournaments, you'll know that some teams like to set up on that kind of platform that's a little bit farther forward. They all just kind of set up there behind a Reinhardt. Some teams like to have some people there and then a couple like way back, sitting up on top of the buildings to keep, maybe like there's Zenyatta safe back there or something like that. And when people attack that point, sometimes you just try to go through the left side where, when Symmetra is played, she would set up all her turrets and all that. Sometimes you just go straight up the middle. Sometimes, you'll see a play where a team moves in, their Winston jumps up on the platform to disrupt. At the same time, the Tracer runs through, dashes through to get to the point, start building some percentage there, while the rest of the team comes through behind those two and kind of tries to pick apart the defensive team that's now got their attention split in different places. But plays like that teams will be making offensively especially, are going to become much more in-depth, much more complicated, and much more tight too as teams get better. And that's something that's really hard to see as a spectator or talk about as a caster without a minimap. And just for the sake of adding it on there, yeah, there's my minimap, ggDoA. It's pretty crap, but that's what it is. So, move my guys around. Oh, look, Zenyatta's jumping down the pit. No, Zenyatta, come back. Oh, you made it. Wow, how do you do that? Anyway, it's something that I think is easier said than done as far as implementation goes, right? With like this point on Ilios, it's not so bad. I mean, you can fit the whole point in the corner of the screen without taking up too much screen real estate, which is of course a big concern. You don't want to take away too much of the field of battle, right? You want to have the information you need to communicate communicated without distracting from everything else, right? You don't want everything to get too cluttered. So on a point like this, yeah, it's reasonable to have a mini map about that size. It's reasonable to maybe have character icons about this size. I just made these little Zenyatta icons that I can move around, and you'll see some overlap and things like that. But it's not too bad. You can kind of get an idea of where everybody is. But if you think about a map like Gibraltar, where or a lot of the payload maps, frankly, where you have to push a long way, the map is kind of winding, and so if you think about the map top down in totality as a whole, it's going to be this long kind of weird shape which doesn't really fit on the screen well. So then the question becomes, well, what do you do about that? Do you maybe have the mini map that you see be just like point? Look at Hollywood, for example. Do you have the mini map at the start of the game be just point A, and then maybe like a little bit wider than point A so that you can see some people hiding behind the doors or something like that? Or some people back at spawn or something, and then when point A is taken, then you move to like the backlot area, the Wild West area, and you show just that much and a little bit outside of it too, because that's where most people are going to be. Maybe that's how you implement the minimap in that category, but again, that's a lot of programming that needs to happen too. So I don't envy the Blizzard design team or their coding team for having to implement something like a minimap, but I really do think it's important because of the reasons I talked about. Because as Overwatch moves forward, the plays that teams make at different geographical points on the maps are going to be the most fascinating and the most interesting thing to watch in the game. I think it's going to be way more interesting than like what's this composition they're running or what's that composition they're running. Like seeing teams make plays like traditional sports teams make plays is what's going to be really, really cool about Overwatch going forward. One of the things I'm most excited about anyway. And in order to really see that happening in real time, you need a mini-map. As it is right now when you watch a VOD, if you really want to understand the plays that are being made, you need to go back and watch the same fight or the same engagement like 8 times or something like that, and then write it down and be like, okay, this person was here, and all that kind of stuff. And you just can't do that kind of thing in real time when you're casting. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but the minimap is going to be very important for demonstrating what makes Overwatch a very, very cool esport. Because it's going to be really cool once teams' strategy gets a lot tighter on these maps. But yeah, I guess that's about it. There's not really a whole lot more to say. Again, the minimap, hard to implement on Blizzard's end. I get why it's not in there right now. And I've got a feeling that's going to take the longest out of the things that I've got on my little list here. But just as important, if not the most important thing that could be added to the game right now. Minimap, we need it. Yeah, that's about it for now. Comment, let me know what you think about the stuff I've said, what you'd like to see added to the game. You can tweet at ggDoA and let me know there as well. And again, I do think Overwatch is going to be a great spectator experience down the road. I think another factor to it too is that the observers that we're going to have observing for these tournaments are going to get a lot better at it. I think the people directing are going to get a lot better at it. Right now, you see a lot of situations where people are changing camera angles too much. You need to pick somebody and stick with it a little bit more, and you need to have a director that's knowledgeable enough to stick with the right person at the right time. You need to have observers that know where to go as well, know the views to get. And so as the observing and the directing get better, the viewership experience is going to get better independently of where the spectator client is at too. So overall, observing, directing is going to get better. Spectator client's going to get improvements at some point. So the viewership experience is going to improve a lot, I think, for Overwatch pretty quickly too, hopefully. But right now, these are 3 changes I think should be on the top of the list as far as what could be the most effective in improving the spectator client experience for Overwatch. The first 2, life bars and the graphical alt thing, hopefully are not too tough to implement. I don't think it would be. Hopefully it'll be fast. The minimap might take a little bit longer, but still very important. That's about all I got to say right now. Yeah, just looking forward to casting some Overwatch. It's going to be awesome. Hope you guys watch. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.